There were still people left, but not for long, and not in any way that mattered. This is Project Anoxia, Chapter 13, Residual. The last stage did not begin with silence. It began with irregularity. At 600 UTC, no synchronized groups remained. Across cities, structures, and elevated spaces, only scattered individuals persisted, each attempting to maintain some version of controlled breathing. No one matched the pattern anymore. Some still tried. They remembered it in fragments. Inhale, pause, exhale. But the timing slipped. The pauses stretched. The rhythm broke. At 6:20 UTC, Layla Rahmani remained conscious. She had spent the final hours trying to understand it, as if understanding would change the outcome. Barely. She sat against a wall in the upper level of the structure she had never fully entered. The door above her remained closed. It no longer mattered. The air was thin, not violently, but completely. Each breath felt partial, incomplete. Her chest rose, stopped, fell. The pattern was gone. At 6:40 UTC, she tried again. Not to survive, to remember. Inhale. Too shallow. Pause. Too long. Exhale. Too late. Her body no longer followed instruction. At 700 UTC, across the world, similar moments occurred. Individuals attempting to recreate something that had already ended. At 7:20 UTC, movement had nearly ceased. People no longer searched, no longer climbed, no longer resisted. Energy was gone. At 7:45 UTC, the acoustic pattern continued. 102 seconds. Perfect. Uninterrupted. Unmatched. At 8:10 UTC, Layla became aware of something unexpected. Not the air, not the pressure. Absence of urgency. The need to breathe was fading. Not physically, but perceptually. Her body still required air, but her mind no longer reacted to its absence. At 8:30 UTC, she lowered her head. Not from weakness, from stillness. Her breathing slowed further. Not controlled, reduced. At 900 UTC, the last attempts at movement ended in most locations. No one remained capable of sustained effort. The world had not become violent, it had become still. At 9:40 UTC, Layla's vision narrowed. Not darkness, reduction. Edges softened, details faded. The environment lost definition. At 10:10 UTC, she took another breath. It did not feel different from the last or the next. Time had separated from action. At 10:40 UTC, the first complete stillness occurred. An individual stopped breathing. Not abruptly, gradually. There was no struggle, no visible resistance, just cessation. At 11 o'clock UTC, others followed, independently, unconnected. At 11:30 UTC, Layla attempted to inhale again. Her chest moved, but less than before. The air did not respond. At 12 o'clock UTC, the distinction between breathing and not breathing began to disappear. There was no clear moment of failure, only reduction. At 12:40 UTC, the acoustic pattern extended again. 110 seconds, still perfect, still present. At 13:10 UTC, there was no one left capable of recognizing it. Not as pattern, not as signal, only as background. At 13:45 UTC, Layla's breathing slowed further. Intervals lengthened, pauses expanded, the body adjusted to less. At 14:20 UTC, she stopped attempting to control it. There was nothing left to control. At 1500 UTC, her final conscious thought did not form fully, not as words, as recognition, that the system had completed. At 1530 UTC, she exhaled, slowly, without urgency, without resistance. She did not inhale again. At 1600 UTC, the last conscious individuals across the planet reached similar endpoints. Not synchronized, but inevitable. At 1700 UTC, human activity ceased. Not entirely. Residual motion remained, but no intention. At 1800 UTC, the atmosphere continued to shift. Oxygen levels declined further. The unknown gas increased, unopposed. At 1900 UTC, the acoustic pattern continued. Longer now, more stable than ever. At 2000 UTC, there were no listeners. At 2100 UTC, there were no observers. At 2200 UTC, there were no participants. At 2300 UTC, there was no resistance. At 0 UTC, the system remained, and humanity did not. Thanks for listening to Chapter 13, Residual. If you like our show, please subscribe and share with your friends and family. The last breaths were taken, quietly, without resistance. Chapter 14 begins. This has been a Last Echo Archive production.